Okay, you can take the B or the F and switch for the N at Broadway and Lafayette. Or you can go over the bridge to DeKalb and catch the Q to Atlantic Avenue, then switch to the IRT, 2, 3, 4, or 5. But don't get on the G. See, that's very tempting, but you wind up on Smith and 9th Street, then you gotta get on the R.
Couldn't you just take the D's straight to Coney Island?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I'm Paul Caputo, sportslogos.net minor league baseball correspondent, broadcasting live, as always, from the Helmet Sunday Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm going to talk today about one of my favorite brands. I just love this brand so much. It was one of my very favorites early on, one of the very first list of minor league baseball logos that I ever made of here are my favorites and here are my not favorites. The Brooklyn Cyclones came in at number 1, and this was like 10 years ago. We're going to be talking to the team's broadcaster, Keith Raad, later on. And I'm going to be talking with Andrew Stilwell of the website Coasters 101 to talk about roller coasters and Coney Island a little bit. But first, the great Todd Radom, who is squeezing this interview in before going to talk to Buster Olney for ESPN and Baseball Tonight. So, Todd, thank you so much for making room for Baseball by Design around your ESPN schedule.
Paul, you are at the top of the heap here, my friend. I'm happy to be with you again. Great to see you. Great to talk about the Brooklyn Cyclones.
Well, just a classic minor league baseball logo. And listeners of this podcast will know, astute listeners will remember back in episode 2, way back in 2021, in December of 2021, you and I spoke a little bit about the Cyclones. And I remember saying in that episode, okay, we're going to do a whole episode about this team at some point. And so here we are doing a whole episode about the Brooklyn Cyclones. And I'm just going to let you take the reins here to tell the story about how you got involved and where the name Cyclones came from.
Yeah. So first of all, and I am always asked, as you can imagine, what's your favorite logo you've ever done? Which is like asking, who's your favorite child? And in the case of logos in my long career, that would be, of your thousands of favorite children, right?
I try so hard not to ask that question on this podcast, the what's your favorite, the hyperbole, anyway.
And to your credit, you don't ask that. However, I always will throw out there the fact that the Cyclones reside in the Valhalla at the very top of the heap somewhere for several reasons, which I'll articulate here. First of all, I am a New York guy, born in Manhattan, raised around New York, went to college in Manhattan, and I'm a guy who, as you know, appreciates history and sports history. So you combine all these things with the fact that the Brooklyn Cyclones, when they came into existence in 2001, became the first professional sports team to reside in Brooklyn since the Dodgers left following the 1957 season. So the significance of this personally and, in terms of the history, what a great thing to be able to sink my teeth into. Additionally, Coney Island is this place, for those who have never been there, which has a really distinctive sense of place. There are very few ballparks that look like, the home of the Cyclones. And there are very few places in America that are, I hate to throw the word iconic around, but it's true. It is this quintessential American playground that has been inviting people to enjoy the place for a century and a half. One of the other things I would note, Paul, is the fact that, not everything ages well. This particular mark, this package, 21 years after it made its debut, I still like, and I think it's aged pretty well. But, a couple of things spring to mind. And I will get to the crux of the Cyclones question, which would be, this was assigned to me. The name was given to me. Work with the Cyclones. The Cyclone is this 1926, I believe, wooden roller coaster that looms large over Coney Island. And you and I have talked about it. That thing is rough this time of year when it's, if it's not shut down already, it is very, very, yeah. So anyway, thinking about working on this thing in the context of the Subway Series in 2000. The Mets and the Yankees, more history, more New York baseball history, New York history. I was working on this as the Mets and the Yankees were in the World Series. And Paul, I can distinctly remember being in the teeth of this project and going to Game 4 of the World Series at Shea Stadium, going to a pregame Mets reception, and just kind of like, all right, I got to take the night off because, I'm hot on this project. And here I am. And that day I found out that we're in good shape with it. So it's got a lot of special memories, to say the least. And it continues to move forward all these years later.
Well, and for you to include it at the top of your list, or at least among the tops of your list, is saying something, because you've done Super Bowl logos, you've done Major League Baseball logos, you've worked with the Big Three, you created team logos in the Big Three Basketball League. You've done a lot of high-end, highly prominent design in the sports world. And so for this minor league baseball logo to stand out among your favorites is certainly saying something. I should also point out, because we just jumped right into the conversation, because me, I get so excited about it. I was remiss to not point out a couple more of your bona fides. You're the author of Winning Ugly, which is an amazing collection and articles about Major League Baseball logos. Just such a fun read if you're a sports fan, if you're a fan of branding in sports. And then, of course, with our mutual friend, Chris Creamer, Fabric of the Game, which is about hockey uniforms. And so you're the author or co-author of those two books. I also have a signed Todd Radom baseball card here.
Well, this is a rare thing here, Paul. There are not too many people who have that. So you knew you were special, but that catapults this specialness into a different place.
And of course, you appear regularly on Buster Olney's Baseball Tonight podcast, and so I just launched into this assuming everyone knew who you were, but I figured I would go through those bona fides there. You mentioned you're a New York guy, and so obviously Brooklyn, is near and dear to your heart. The sort of heritage of that place. I hope I'm allowed to mention right now that you have recently become a Philadelphia guy. You're living in my native Philadelphia, so I assume now you are a diehard Phillies and Eagles fan, and living and dying and talking about water ice and eating cheesesteaks and going down the shore on your weekends.
Well, I'm not quite there yet. I'm in limbo between New York and Philly, but I will be. And that is a big, big deal for me. It will represent the furthest I have ever lived from Times Square, even though it's really not that far. It's not like moving, from your native area to where you currently live. That's a big move. This is not that big a move, but it is a big move for me. But anyway, I will take a rooting interest, I have great relationships with the Phillies. Talk about Winning Ugly. I did a book signing at Citizens Bank Park in 2018 at a Phillies Red Sox game. So that was fun. So I've got friends there. I've got, so my rooting interests will be, I don't know, adopted teams, perhaps, if not all in rooting interest. Water ice, Hoagies, the whole 9 yards.
Hoagies. I love it. All right, let's get back to Brooklyn here. You mentioned the place of Coney Island, right? And there's a mythological quality to Coney Island. I lived, like I said, I grew up in the Philadelphia area, 2-hour drive from New York City. And it took me until just a couple of years ago to get to Coney Island for the first time. And we went there. I went there with my daughter and my nephew to go to a Cyclones game. And I thought it was going to take forever to get there. We got there, a little earlier than I thought we would. And so we had a chance. We bought a Frisbee and threw a Frisbee around on the beach for a little while. We rode the roller coasters. We've already mentioned the Cyclone is just, it's you pay $10 to get a low grade concussion. I've said that before, to ride the Cyclone. We did the Nathan's hot dogs, but people see it on the 4th of July on ESPN. The hot dog eating contest is televised there. So, and it's, famously included in a Seinfeld episode when they're on the subway trying to get out there. And so you used the word iconic, and I think that's fair to use for it, right? It's got in my mind, almost like a mythological quality. And so for it to be the backdrop over center field as you're watching a baseball game in Brooklyn, and for that roller coaster to be featured as the sort of main visual element in their branding, really said something about that place and what, sort of how people perceive Coney Island and what Brooklyn is sort of in the cultural ether there. So how did you capture that in this roller coaster based logo that you created?
So a couple of things. Coney Island, for those who are not aware of it, really is one of these places that, for all of its recent success and all of the history, it was a place that fell on hard times, starting in the, let's say, 1950s. It was one of these places that, let's put it this way. I'm a child of the 70s, New Yorker. That was not someplace that I was going when I was a kid.
All right.
And we can look at Coney Island through the prism of popular culture, because that's kind of what it's all about. And the movie The Warriors, which is not a positive branding situation for Coney Island, but Coney Island, starting, I believe, with there's a guy named Ben Osborne who you should talk to at some point too. A friend of mine who wrote a book about the first season of the Brooklyn Cyclones. I don't know if you know Ben. Yeah, very, very good guy. Used to be editor-in-chief of Slam magazine. Does several different things these days. But anyway, I digress. But the construction of that ballpark and the arrival of the Cyclones represented a kind of seminal moment in the comeback of Coney Island, and a lot of good things followed. Coney Island, to your point, is a place that if you are traveling by subway from Manhattan, it is a long ride, but it's a fascinating ride. And you see neighborhoods change, and you see, all this stuff. But there is such a great thing, and you could probably speak to this, when you emerge at the end of the line at Stilwell Avenue, and you smell suntan lotion and the ocean, and you get out there and you are faced with this, typical kind of blue sky near the ocean after having gotten on the train in many cases in Times Square. Yeah. Quite a different thing. And you go through all of this stuff, and there is the ballpark, and it's spectacular. It has a very distinct sense of place itself, in a place that has this really great distinct sense of place. So to get back to the logo, which is basically what we're talking about, some of my inspirations, thinking about the history and thinking about the kind of carnival atmosphere that Coney Island is so well known for, I looked at old posters and luggage labels and postcards. Look at that Cyclones type and the lettering, and think of those greetings from postcards with the flowing lettering. Absolutely. That were such a big deal. And the colors have some meaning as well. The blue, Pantone 288 blue, Mets blue. All right. There is a hint of Columbia blue. If I'm recalling this correctly, the Wilpon family, which, Mets, Cyclones, Columbia grads. So if I'm recalling this correctly, there was a request for Columbia blue, which really worked out beautifully. And then you've got, these vibrant, red and gold/yellow, all very harmonious colors that come together in this kind of, loving homage, certainly, to what Coney Island is all about, but it's very festive, and it harkens back to all of that vernacular stuff that I discussed earlier.
The retro type, that you see on postcards is kind of perfect, because it's, it sort of flows like a roller coaster would, but it absolutely, you pull it out of that roller coaster and put it on a postcard, and each letter has a picture of a different thing from Coney Island in there, right? Like that would be perfect for a postcard. And then, but the overall effect of it is, like you say, it's just it's the blue and orange complements that you see with the Mets. One of the other things that I have not mentioned yet, I should mention that that the Brooklyn Cyclones are the High A affiliate for the New York Mets.
I would be remiss if I didn't say that part of the task with branding the Cyclones was, it's New York. It's a major league city. There was no minor league baseball within the city limits of New York for, a multitude of reasons, which we won't get into here. Sure. So part of the task was really to create a major league brand for a low minor league team in one of the biggest cities in America.
Sure. Because when you created this brand, they were in the short season single A New York Penn League, and so it was even lower than their current High A status. And when we talked way back in 2015 for the first time, I think for the first time you and I spoke was in 2015 when I was writing this article for sportslogos.net, was about, it was for the story behind the nickname series that I write for that website. And one of the things we talked about was creating a brand that was outside this trend towards wacky, kid-friendly, cartoonish brands, creating, like you say, a major league brand for a minor league team. And it's noteworthy that it has stood the test of time, right? Like, and I'll talk about this with Keith next, but they do a lot of fun stuff. Their Seinfeld nights are hilarious, and they have a lot of minor league fun. But the brand is quite serious, even for a brand that's based on a roller coaster. It's not wacky in the least. It's it's a cleaner, more sophisticated look, which is the Wichita Wind Surge's Turbo Tubs brand notwithstanding, is consistent with your sort of visual vernacular, right? To borrow your term there, a more serious approach to sports branding than, some of the other things that we're seeing in minor league baseball right now. So how do you explain this brand standing the test of time in the face of the fact that minor league baseball trends have gone very much the other direction since then?
Part of it's luck. Just maybe you've got a management there, and managements come and go over the course of 20 some odd years. But, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right. The brand remains popular. There's also another component, which you and I haven't discussed yet, which is the inclusion of the Brooklyn Dodgers B in there.
Yeah.
So, it's got a lot going for it, I think, in that sense. And, listen, if you and I can recall, and I'm sure some of your listeners recall, and I'm just, when the Staten Island Yankees at the time introduced Pizza Rats, right? There was a hue and cry. New York is just a little bit different. It's not. Yeah. It is a big city. It is not a small market. I'm understating the significance of all of that, but I think that the staying power, it's solidly constructed. It's versatile. It actually activates pretty well digitally, which was not a concern back when I was working on this at the turn of the millennium. And I think it was set up to succeed because it didn't lean into trends heavily. Trends come and go far more so now than at any point in our lifetimes. Our attention spans, I say this in every podcast or any interview I do, our attention spans are so diminished. Trends kind of can come and go in milliseconds. And the Cyclones look is decidedly untrendy in a New York way.
Right. One of the things that you see in sports branding, in baseball logos in particular, is the interlocking letters. And so you just mentioned the Brooklyn B that appears in this, and it interlocks with the C. So paying homage to the old Dodgers B cap, but the team that obviously left Brooklyn to move to Los Angeles. That's a really important detail. It's not just about the fact that this is a Mets affiliate and they're playing in New York City, but that paying tribute visually to the team that the major league team that used to play in Brooklyn is an important thing to do.
I think it's generational. Let's think about the fact that when the Cyclones emerged, new in 2001, there were plenty of baseball fans in the New York area who had been Brooklyn Dodgers fans, and their team was ripped away and transported to the West Coast. Time, of course, takes its toll, and newer generations really have no touchstone when it comes to the Brooklyn Dodgers. It's kind of this mythical thing that is back there. It might as well be it's sort of ancient history, but it is a cool thing, and they do celebrate that along with the Giants in the ballpark, the New York Giants. And I think it's like a kind of a nice add-on. Let's put it that way. While it might have been more critical as a selling point back in 2001, not so much now. And listen, when Citi Field, the home of the Mets, opened up in 2009, it looks like Ebbets Field, the home of the Dodgers, and there was a lot of criticism at that time because the feeling was that the Wilpon family, which had this, Fred Wilpon, Brooklyn native, famously went to high school with Sandy Koufax, was so into the history of the Brooklyn Dodgers that the look of the ballpark excluded the look of the Mets to a great extent. Well, they corrected that pretty quickly, and it's not a controversy anymore.
Sure. It's important to me too. I love this fact. The Brooklyn Cyclone itself, the roller coaster, opened 30 years before the Dodgers left town. So if you think about how long that Cyclone roller coaster has been inflicting low-grade concussions on visitors to Coney Island, it's an amazing history of that place. So.
No question. Fillings being, jarred in my teeth. I'm thinking about getting on there maybe after a couple of beers with some friends at a Cyclones game 15 years ago, something like that. And one particular friend of mine who has always been kind of the devil on my shoulder since college days, like, oh, come on, let's go. I got it for all of us. Get on this thing. And all of a sudden, and it was very late August, early September.
Yeah.
And boy, that thing is jarring, far more so this time of year than when it's freshly oiled to open up the season after Memorial Day.
I'm wondering, and maybe they could just make you a manager of Luna Park there where the Cyclone exists. Maybe you could suggest, hey, how about like sometime in July we oil it up again? Like let's.
Maybe they don't have the budget, Paul. Maybe their oiler is, has a summer vacation. I have no idea.
That would be a great thing if someone who worked at Coney Island had a summer vacation and they just said, sorry, that's all the oil you get. So
it's possible. It's probably not the case, but maybe I do think that you talk about mystique, another word that gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
The Cyclone itself has a mystique, and I think part of that mystique is this is a rough ride, and it is not for the faint of heart.
You sent me a photo of the sign like right by the exit that says, "Thank you for riding the Cyclone. Please come again." And it looks like this sort of metallic plate with hand painted letters. Yeah. And that sign has the feeling of a something that's been around since 1926 as well, right? Like it's just like the whole sort of visual experience is just steeped in history, it feels like.
Yeah, I think that again, you talk about Coney Island, and there is a new Coney Island that we can talk about because a lot of these rides are come after the Brooklyn Cyclones arrived. There has been this economic renaissance out there. It is, again, safer. It's a place that people want to go to in a way that they didn't 30 years ago. But there is this underlying authenticity. And you talk about a brand, the Coney Island brand, which people the world over know, even if they've never been there. And that sign speaks to that. So I hope that kind of detail does not get replaced anytime soon, because the real Coney Island, and that includes Nathan's, it resides somewhere under this. I don't know if it's a glitzy new exterior, but something that's a little bit more polished and new.
Todd, this has been, as always, so much fun. I have such a good time talking to you, and we've already talked about the Wind Surge and, of course, the Turbo Tubs brands that you did in Wichita. And now we've gotten to talk about one of my favorites, the Brooklyn Cyclones. You told me in our pre-interview about a team that I did not know about. And so this is going to be another conversation, I think, for us. The Queens Kings, who you told me played for 1 year in 2000, who I looked up after we talked about it. They have a remarkable logo that you created for them. And so this is brand new, as it were, brand new information for me about this incredible team. So I think there's going to have to be another episode after we talk about ligatures in episode 58. To talk about the Queens Kings, because this brand is remarkable and not one that I knew anything about. And it's got this amazing serifed Q in there with a playing card king in it. And so, so this is a fun brand that we're going to have to delve further into sometime when, when you don't have to jump off and go talk to Buster Olney.
A 1 year wonder. And we can have a conversation about a 1 year wonder, you and I, that can stretch for a half an hour. I'm certain of it, Paul.
The Queens Kings. I love this. I'm so glad you told me about this. And can't wait for that conversation. So Todd, thank you again. Thank you for letting me keep you a little bit longer than I said I was going to. And we'll talk again soon.
Always enjoy being with you, my friend. Looking forward to the next one, Paul. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Welcome back. I'm very happy to be joined right now by Keith Raad, who is the broadcaster for the Cyclones, also an account executive, has been with the team a relatively short time, and so I had the opportunity now to talk to Keith about what the team means to the local community, what the nickname means, and most importantly, Keith, have you actually ridden the Cyclone roller coaster?
Yes, I don't think it was part of the job interview, but you have to have ridden the Cyclone roller coaster at least once before you can start working in Brooklyn. Yes, the famous Cyclone.
It is not the smoothest of roller coasters. You kind of feel the age of the thing when you ride it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if people knew that going in, it might be a better experience. But yeah, it's not as smooth as the new ones that you have. We have Six Flags on the East Coast. They've got brand new roller coasters every couple of years. The Cyclone's been a staple for, I think, almost a century.
So you're from the New York area. You're from Long Island, I understand, and so this team has been a part of your culture growing up, and that it's interesting to me because I grew up in the Philadelphia area, just a couple hours from Brooklyn. The one time I went to a game in Brooklyn, we actually drove up from the Jersey Shore. We were staying down in Ocean City, New Jersey, and we drove up. And I think for much of America, for people who have not been to New York, who have not actually gotten out to Coney Island, that it almost feels like a movie set, right? To be in Coney Island, it feels like almost fictional in a way. And so there's a sort of lore, there's a mythology to Coney Island, the roller coasters, and now you have this baseball team that brought baseball back to New York after the Dodgers left, obviously. So what is the significance to you as someone who grew up in the area of having a team right there in this almost sort of mythological setting of Coney Island?
Yeah, so it's New York City's playground that we call it. I mean, just the colors of Coney Island are the thing that stick out the most when folks are either taking the subway down from New York City or they're driving into town. It strikes you, and we have the parachute jump, which is the highest peak, basically in Coney Island, which is right in right field over our ballpark, which is affectionately known as the Eiffel Tower of Brooklyn. So we call it that. But that's that image. I mean, we even have the Coney Island Brewery, and that's one of their lasting images of Coney Island. But you're right, it is kind of like a movie set. Growing up on Long Island, one of my favorite books was Great Gatsby, and whatever version that they gave us in school, on the front cover there's a woman with eyes. You can see kind of a shadow of a face, but then everything underneath it is the bright lights of Coney Island. So for me as a kid growing up, loving that book, that was always a great, like you said, mythological view of what the place is all about. And then once you get in there, I started working there in 2018. You start to see the place come alive, and it has changed year after year, decade after decade with what it is all about over there. But it continues to be an experience for everybody who comes down. One of my favorite things, I take the subway in every day. So the corner of Surf and Stillwell, I pass Nathan's on the way to work during the sunshine, and then at night, at nighttime, and just seeing everybody sit at Nathan's, get a hot dog and French fries. Maybe people come down from once a summer to grab a dog and some fries and enjoy Coney Island, and then maybe catch a Cyclones game. But I get to see those faces. I can tell how that they seem new. They seem like they're here for the first time. And when you get to see that, their eyes and how they're soaking it all in, you do realize that this is a pretty cool place, pretty unique place to work.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I mentioned I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I'm a Phillies fan. So, the motivation to motivate me to go see an affiliate for the New York Mets, takes a little bit of doing, right? We're natural
Sure.
rivals there. But we did do that. We drove up from the Jersey Shore. It was a couple hours. I didn't know what traffic was going to be like. I mean, driving in New York City, the flip side of New York being sort of mythological is that in a lot of ways it's very imposing, right? Like if you don't spend a lot of time there. And so, I anticipated a lot of traffic, and it was going to take us forever to get there, and it was going to cost $1 million to park. And of course, none of that was true, right? Like we just sort of breezed right up there, and, we parked very easily by the ballpark, and we ended up with, hours before the game actually was scheduled to start. And so I was there with my nephew and my daughter. And so, we walked Coney Island. We walked the sort of full length of Coney Island, bought a Frisbee, went down there on the water and sort of threw a Frisbee around. We did exactly like you said. We got some Nathan's hot dogs, and, we made a day of it. And then one of our favorite things during the game, it was a rain shortened affair. It ended after 5. So it was an official game. I counted on my list because it was an official game. but the experience of just experiencing Coney Island and then being able to see the rides over the outfield wall really drove home that aspect of the experience. As I presume a Mets fan, I presume you're a Mets fan. Can I make that assumption?
Well, growing up, I can't lie. I was a Yankees fan, but when
Oh,
you work in baseball and you work in baseball very closely with human beings that are starting out at the very young levels of the minor leagues, and you meet all the coaches and the coordinators and the people, and you start to watch those guys graduate to the big leagues. I call the Mets my family. So
okay.
I am, I don't know if that's the most political answer, but the Mets, I am more closely entwined with the Mets than I ever have been with the Yankees. So
Okay.
yes, I'm with the
Well,
Mets.
the question that I was going to ask was sort of with all that setup of sort of painting that scene there. Minor league baseball, the relationship with the team to its parent club isn't always necessarily essential to the experience of that ballpark. I'm sure you encounter people all the time for whom having baseball in that setting is just critically important. How important is that to you in your job in sort of representing the team out there?
Yeah, first of all, I'm an absolute lover of history, and when you're working in broadcasting, you have to constantly be a storyteller. So my first task when you get a job like this is to learn about the people that are coming to your stadium, learn about the borough. And what I always tell people is that when the Dodgers left, men were weeping in the streets. So that the impact of bringing baseball back to those same people and their kids and grandkids. Dodgers left after 57. We opened our doors in 2001, and that first year, I think season tickets sold out in about 12 minutes or something like that.
Right.
But that constant representation of what once was for baseball in Brooklyn, and the meaning that people have with this sport, which I think is a little bit of a different meaning that anyone has ever had with any other sports. Football's cool, hockey's awesome, but nobody is as intertwined with something like Americans are with baseball, and families are with baseball, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, that kind of thing. So breathing in Coney Island, you're also living the history of that. So every single day you're walking into this historic place that has meant so much for the city for so many different years. Like I said, the identity of Coney Island has changed over and over and over again. And so when you mix the history of Coney Island and the history of Brooklyn baseball, it's a special place. And we have our own identity with the Cyclone and a little bit different than the Mets. But I will say, since Steve Cohen has purchased our team, and purchased the Mets, there's a lot more of a marriage there. We're involving more orange and blue in our color schemes and alternate jerseys and things like that. But we'll never lose the identity fully of being the Brooklyn Cyclones and being our own organization.
Well, and I think, even without, the ownership question, who owns the team, I think you're seeing a lot of that in minor league baseball now with these 10-year player development contracts that all the minor league teams are signing. Has the relationship to the parent club changed now that you've advanced levels? In the reshuffling of minor league baseball, you went from a short season single A team to a high A team. Just the fact that you're a couple levels closer, counting a level that doesn't exist anymore, does that make the relationship with the parent club even more important?
Absolutely, because now you have fewer and fewer levels for these guys to experience, but also the whole restructuring was to better the experience of each player, better facilities, better work conditions, and things like that. So all of that just, I think, sharpens the focus for all these teams. Instead of having seven, some teams have 8 levels, multiple teams at each level, and now you can really focus on the 4 key levels and then a couple of complex and Dominican academies. Everybody loves it. Everybody's working hand in hand and trying to make the experience better. I know it was a frustrating time for a lot of teams, a lot of organizations, but it was something that was always coming, and we've certainly loved working with the Mets. The Mets love working with us because we're their little brother in Brooklyn. But high A, I mean, the Mets own St. Lucie, which is low A, us at high A, and Triple A Syracuse, and we all work very, very closely together to try to achieve that same goal and have the same experience everywhere you go.
Listen, I know that the Mets are family here, right? And I don't mean to cast aspersions here, but the Syracuse Mets and the St. Lucie Mets, those are pretty boring, right? Can we get some unique nicknames for those teams?
I don't. That's above my pay grade. But St. Lucie Mets, I know, is definitely a tie to just being local in the area with the Floridians and spring training and tying that home to New York. Syracuse, I know they were with Washington for many years. Mets were with the Las Vegas Aviators forever, and then came over to Syracuse. So
Yeah,
I wonder if they'll change it. I don't know.
I would love to see them do. The Syracuse Mets likely will not, because they just recently changed. But anyway, that's I'm putting you on the spot there. I understand that. You all do some fun, you have a very serious, professional looking brand, a serious baseball brand created by Todd Radom that, is not sort of party to this, minor league baseball wackiness that you see out there, on the landscape. But you do some really fun stuff because you're minor league baseball and there's fun stuff to be doing. One of my favorite things that you all do are the Seinfeld nights, because Seinfeld is as intertwined with New York as anything. And then these sort of promotional nights that you do where, I think you did a soup Nazi night. There was like an Elaine dance-off competition. There's been some just great ties to the TV show Seinfeld. Has that relationship been something that's been fun to cultivate for you? Is that something you guys have fun coming up with year after year, or the Seinfeld nights?
Absolutely. It's my favorite show of all time. And Billy Harner, who I think you've spoken to in the past, he was the founder, the father of that, if you will, back in 2014.
Yeah.
And every single year we're able to get more and more creative with the night. We've had different jerseys. We've been the Brooklyn Cyclones. We've been the Brooklyn Marble Rise during some of these events. But yeah, they're absolutely awesome. And I know that New York Nico, who's a big Instagram account in New York, he put out the Elaine dancing competition that just blew up on a viral video on Instagram this past year. But we've been doing that every single year. After every Seinfeld night game, we have an Elaine dancing competition. And we would stop doing it, kind of thing. But there's just crazy Seinfeld fans that come out every year. So we keep putting it on, of course.
We keep doing it.
Especially that Elaine dancing competition. I mean, you see men and women, but mostly women dressing in that kind of ugly Elaine dress with the black and the orange. I don't know, something your mother would wear in the 90s, and then an Orioles cap just for the kicker. But it's awesome. But that is we loved Seinfeld in New York, and it's no secret that it did well because it's a New York show, like you said. It's a worldwide show at the same time, and it's just a perfect marriage of New York baseball and laughter, which I love Seinfeld for the laughter, and minor league baseball, you have to be entertaining in multiple different ways to make people laugh. So it's a perfect marriage.
It really is. I that's a bucket list item for me, is to get to a Cyclones game on Seinfeld night. Keith, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, because I love talking about the Copa de la Diversión brands that the different teams have out there, and your Copa brand, the Spanish language brand, this minor league baseball program that seeks to expand its fan base by appealing to Spanish speaking communities. You all have been the Jefes in the Copa program. What's the significance of Jefes to the Spanish speaking communities in Brooklyn? And I know it's more than just one community, right? It's it's a lot of diversity in that area. And so where does Jefes come from, and how does it represent the Cyclones?
Yeah, some teams with Copa have kind of just, I guess, put the Spanish twist on their name, and they just basically translate it. But we decided that Jefes was more of who we were. The Jefes translates directly to boss. So Brooklyn bosses, we're a very confident borough of Brooklyn. We have a lot of different people, a lot of different different ethnicities, and just take our team for example. We are. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but 50% American, 50% Latino, just in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
And our manager this year, a guy by the name of Luis Rivera, who is a former Cyclone, everybody calls him Jefe. And it's one of those words that is used a lot in that community. It's one of the words that we love. And so when we switch over for our Copa games, we become the Brooklyn Jefes, because quite honestly, Brooklyn thinks it's better than everybody else. So we are the bosses.
That's perfect. It's a great Copa brand, and I love that program, and so it's been fun to follow that for sure. Keith, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I know everyone knows how to find the Brooklyn Cyclones online and on social media. How can people find you?
Twitter at Keith Raad, KeithRaad, and Instagram at Keith R. Rad.
That's perfect. Thank you, Keith. I appreciate your time. I hope to get back to a Brooklyn Cyclones game sooner rather than later.
Yeah, Paul. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. This is a treat for me right here. I get the opportunity to speak with Andrew Stilwell, who is a writer for Coaster101.com and one of the hosts of the Coaster 101 podcast. We're going to talk about roller coasters. We're going to talk about amusement parks. We're going to talk about Coney Island and obviously the Cyclone, because that's the subject of this episode. Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Paul, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Can you tell me a little bit about why it is that you dedicate time and a podcast and a website to roller coasters?
Yeah, absolutely. So Coaster 101, we cover news, reviews, interviews, in other words that end in IEWS, about the theme park and amusement industry. And, around the world, there's thousands of roller coasters. And, especially in North America, there's hundreds of amusement parks. There's always something going on, whether it's new rides, new shows, new food items, things like that. We try to cover it all at Coaster 101. Why I first got involved is growing up, I grew up in South Florida. So we were a couple hour drive to Disney. We would do the trip to Disney or Universal a couple times a year. In 2000, I moved to North Carolina, which not necessarily known for its theme parks. And, we've got Carowinds in the Charlotte area, kind of where I'm from. But other than that, it's a little bit of an amusement park desert. But I always had this interest and passion for roller coasters and thrill rides. And as soon as I was able to ride like the big roller coasters, I moved to North Carolina. And so I was like, I need to kind of keep this passion going. So I was consuming everything I could on the internet, all the guidebooks, all the everything, and just always had this passion for roller coasters and wanted to kind of grow up and design them. And that was like my lofty goal. Some kids want to be a baseball player or a doctor or whatever. I wanted to design roller coasters, and then got to high school and realized I'm not very good at math and science and the physics behind all this. I was like, well, I'm really good at Roller Coaster Tycoon, but you put actual math and things behind it. I was like, can't do it. In college, I was a creative writing minor, and I found Coaster 101 because they had like a photo contest like back in 2013. And so I was like, well, I like winning contests. I have a picture of a roller coaster on my phone that right now looks like it was taken on like a TI-83 calculator with how phones have come. But I kind of became familiar with Coaster 101 through this photo contest. And then they were looking for writers in the Carolinas where I am. And the rest is history. I've been writing for them since October of 2013. So coming up on 9 years. And we've again started a podcast in the middle of the pandemic. I never thought I would say those words, but we got tired of baking bread and finding sourdough starters. So the next best pandemic thing was come up with a podcast. And so it's a great excuse for me to travel to areas of the country that I've never been. I mean, I'm sure that's kind of like you with minor league baseball stadiums where, you're traveling the country trying to find these, new and unique minor league stadiums. I traveled the country trying to find roller coasters and theme parks and amusement parks that I've never personally been to.
It seems to me like there's a lot of parallels between the amusement park industry and the minor league baseball industry, right? Like I'm sure you have a life list of amusement parks that you've been to, roller coasters that you've ridden on. Everyone in my world out there on the Twitter sphere and in the podcast world, we're all tracking the number of baseball parks we've been to. If there's a new one coming up, if there's, so what is it about the amusement park industry and amusement parks in general that make them such a significant part of our culture that would make people like you or, me with baseball go seek them out and travel for them and try to experience them sort of sequentially like that?
Yeah, it is funny. I did, as soon as you said that, I was picking up on the parallels immediately. It's, those who are deep into the roller coaster and theme park hobby, they have what we call a coaster count. So
Nice.
As many roller coasters as you've ridden, you count it one time, and then your count, there are some people who have counts in the thousands. They travel all around the world to, very small remote areas, and they will go ride a roller coaster that's primarily designed for children, just to add it to their account. But I think, like minor league baseball, amusement parks, they provide a bit of an escape from the real world. And it's, not necessarily, you hear places like Disney and Universal and these heavily themed environments, and it's a really good escape from reality. But even at, your local amusement park, Paul, I know you're in Colorado, so a place like Elitch Gardens, for example, in downtown Denver, it's a way to just escape the hustle and bustle of reality. And they got their start in North America, in the United States, and the late 1800s. There were trolley parks, and they were designed as ways for people to kind of leave the city, leave their job, and go kind of recreate for the weekend. And what originally became, picnic pavilions, there was, dance halls, things like that. Around the turn of the 20th century, they started adding mechanical amusement rides, carousels, Ferris wheels, roller coasters, things of that nature. And there's always something new coming. I mean, the next year alone, there's 50 roller coasters around North America that have been announced as being built for 2023.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's a new baseball stadium. There's not 50 new baseball stadiums around the country, but when there's a new one, it automatically pops up on fans of the industry, fans of amusement parks in general. It pops up on their radar and says, okay, well, there's a roller coaster opening in Atlanta next year that's at this really small park called Fun Spot America Atlanta. But everyone is like, this is going to be a great ride. We need to find our way to Atlanta and ride it. So it's part of the chase, I think. And, for me, I'm somebody who's, again, I've ridden a lot of roller coasters. There are people who have ridden a lot more than me. I'm inching towards 300 roller coasters that I can check off my list. Slowly but surely, I'm getting there.
Wow.
But it's the escape from the 9-to-5 world. I've got a full-time job. I work in marketing and communications, and the 9-to-5 life is great. It's good that this has a paycheck, but the hobby in general allows me to travel to places I've never been. Like I went up to Erie, Pennsylvania a couple years ago because I was in Pittsburgh covering a media event for a new roller coaster. But because I'd never been to that area of the country, I landed at the airport in Pittsburgh, and I get my rental car and I drive north to this park called Coney Island Lake Park, which has since closed. And they had a historic, like almost 100-year-old wooden roller coaster. And then you go, another hour north to another little small park called Waldemere, right there on the shores of Lake Erie. And they've got one of the best wooden roller coasters in the world. But nobody knows about it unless you're in this hobby or you're local to Erie, Pennsylvania.
So, Andrew, I don't think I've ever suggested this during an interview here, but it's possible that you and I are the same person from parallel dimensions, because I'm starting to think that your life sounds an awful lot like mine in terms of when you started writing about this subject matter, when you started your podcast, the kind of work that you do. I'm in graphic design and communications myself. That I have a 9-to-5 job that, this is not my full-time gig, obviously. And yeah, I plan work trips around the fact that there are minor league baseball stadiums nearby. I literally just planned a work trip for 8 people, and I waited until the Arkansas Travelers released their schedule so that I could make sure that our trip to Little Rock coincided with a minor league baseball game. So I think we may be living parallel lives here, just in different subject matters.
Absolutely.
So this episode is about the Brooklyn Cyclones, who are named for a very famous roller coaster. What is it about Coney Island that it makes it so special, makes it so iconic in the eyes of Americans? What is it that makes Coney Island special?
I think Coney Island, from a historical standpoint, you can go back to the late 1800s through about World War I, World War II. Coney Island was actually the nation's biggest amusement tourist area. When people say Coney Island, they think it's one amusement park, but actually, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was made up of 3 major amusement parks, which were Luna Park, Dreamland, and Steeplechase Park. And it all kind of comes together on this one space, which it's all right there on the ocean. And what people know now as Luna Park is kind of the main tourist destination, but given its proximity to New York and a city where there's so many skyscrapers and so much traffic and so many people, and it's the hustle and bustle. But, 30, 40 minutes outside of the city, depending on where you are, there's just this little slice of Americana, I think. And the Coney Island Cyclone originally opened in 1927, so celebrating 95 years this year. And it's honestly, when you look at roller coasters in North America, believe it or not, there's almost 1,000 roller coasters in North America. The Coney Island Cyclone is the 9th oldest operating roller coaster in North America right now.
Wow.
So it's had staying power. And I mean, it's a lot of roller coasters that are up in the Northeast. You've got Leap the Dips, which is at Lakemont Park, which actually in the outfield of the Altoona Curve, if we can get a little minor league baseball plug here. But,
absolutely.
Yes. So it's had staying power. And when I was reading those guidebooks as a kid and learning more about roller coasters, every roller coaster book you ever buy, it's got a picture of the Coney Island Cyclone, just because it is this iconic, back in the day, it was a peak of like modern engineering.
Yeah.
And obviously now it's not going to break any records or anything like that, but its staying power is part of the reason I think it is such kind of an iconic piece of New York history, Brooklyn history, but also Coney Island in general, and the amusement and theme park space.
Is it one of your 300? Have you ridden the Cyclone?
I have not. Before this summer, I had never ridden a roller coaster in New York. It's sad. It's very sad. It's on the list. It's one of those places I want to go. I'm going to try and go at some point next year, and I'm going to go. I'm going to ride it. I'm going to get it done. But
well, wear protective headgear. It's a head rattler.
I've heard that, but it's also, it's one of those things. Like, I'm somebody who watches the Nathan's Famous hot dog eating contest every year. You always see the shots of Coney Island in the background. And in 2021, they had it at the Cyclones Park because of COVID. Yeah. And so you get to see not necessarily the Cyclone right there, but you have the Thunderbolt, which is a more modern roller coaster that's right there kind of in left field. Yeah. And it's just such a really, really cool visual. And I really, really want to get there, but I haven't yet.
I have to know here, because you're talking about your lists. I keep sort of different versions of my list. You said you hadn't ridden a roller coaster in New York until last summer. I have a list of, the total number of ballparks I've been to, which is exactly 100 right now, by the way, oddly.
Nice.
Not counting spring training. It would be like 112 with spring training, but 100 ballparks, 36 states where I've seen baseball games. I've got it broken down by major league, current major leagues, expired or defunct major leagues. What are the lists that you keep of roller coasters?
The list I keep obviously my total count. So I'm at 270, 269, 270, something like that right now. Yeah. I've got it. It's on a website. There's a website. This is not sponsored content. There's a website called coastercount.com that's really user friendly. You just go, you click. If you've ridden it, it adds it to your count. It's great. Nice. And if you can think back to amusement parks you visited as a kid, you can catalog it by date. You can catalog it by then, but I keep basically a best of my favorite steel coasters and my favorite wooden coasters. I go to, a top 10, but then the overall list of just what I've ridden.
Coastercount.com sounds like in my world here, there's a website called Baseball Bucket List. And so it's the similar thing. You get on there and you track everything that you've done, and you can even create your own list of, I want to do this and this and this and this. We recently got to 2 baseball games at different ballparks in one day. We had a group of folks go. Have you ever gone to 2 amusement parks in one day?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned that Pennsylvania trip. I did that recently on a work trip. I had some time. We were in the Bay Area of Texas. Okay. So I landed in Houston, got my rental car, drove down to Galveston to the Galveston Pleasure Pier. Rode one roller coaster, which is all they have, and then drove up to Kemah, Texas. Kemah. I don't know how it's pronounced. Kemah. They also have one roller coaster there. Yeah. And so I got, managed to get them both, but there's been days where I have done multiple amusement parks in a day, just to ride one roller coaster and leave. It's Not something I'm particularly proud of sometimes, but it gets the job done. And I'm not ever in that area of the country, and I don't know when I'll ever be back. So the catch is, when I've got the time, you try to see what's in the area. And there's another good website that's it's called Roller Coaster Database.
Okay.
So you can plug in where you are and you can know, okay, there is a roller coaster primarily designed for kids that's going to be like 45 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
And it's at this steakhouse / miniature golf course in Eastern North Carolina. And so if I'm by myself, it's no problem, but it's one of those, if I've got, my younger brother with me, for example, I had to convince him one time to go ride this roller coaster called Dinosaur Canyon, which is 8 feet tall. It's run by a guy who does not have a full set of teeth, but it's at this, again, it's called Deadwood. It's in the middle of nowhere in Eastern North Carolina, but not even an amusement park. It's a roller coaster. It's there.
Yeah.
We rode it. He still hasn't forgiven me. It's been years at this point, but it's all part of the chase. That's just the way it is.
That is, I'm just amazed by like how many parallels there are in this world to the minor league baseball world, that the lengths people will go to get to a baseball park, I had a work trip once where I flew into St. Louis, drove 4 hours to Memphis to see one game, and then drove 3 hours back to where my work event was. And I flew in, I got up and took a 6 a.m. flight so that I could make all this happen. But I mean, just like you say, it's just like the lengths we'll go to follow our passions here. And this is a great passion, right? Like, absolutely. I mean, I remember, because I obviously don't have, I don't share your same level of passion for roller coasters, but everybody, has roller coasters as part of their lives and amusement parks. I go to the Jersey Shore every year with my family. We go to the Ocean City Boardwalk, right? Like, and there's a couple of, there's 2-3 roller coasters right there on the Ocean City Boardwalk. I remember, I grew up outside of Philadelphia. My very first roller coaster was the Comet at Hershey Park.
Yep.
And then I remember waiting to be old enough to ride the Super Duper Looper at Hershey Park, right?
Yep.
So those were, it just sticks out in my memory. My family took a vacation when I was younger to Colonial Williamsburg.
Yep.
And obviously Busch Gardens is right there. And
yes.
And I spent just literally, I mean, this was way before the internet, right? Like I got brochures from Busch Gardens. I spent like so much time like studying the Loch Ness Monster to see, what and I was telling my parents, I'm like, there's a 70-foot drop that you do in a second and a half. I was giving them all these stats. And so you can imagine my horror when we got to Colonial Williamsburg, and it's like the guys in the tri-corner caps making candles, right? I'm like, no, we have to go to Busch Gardens now. So anyway, it's I love these parallels. Andrew, I have kept you way longer than I said I was going to, because I'm so fascinated by this passion that you have, and again, the parallels between the amusement park world and the minor league baseball world, and the places where they coincide. There are a number of places that have maybe not roller coasters necessarily, but a lot of places that have Ferris wheels out there in the outfield, and there's definitely some, there's amusements out there that correlate. That these worlds do overlap, and there's a lot of similar reasons people do these things. And so I love that we got to have this conversation, because it's such a fascinating world and so much fun. So thank you again for joining me. Can you tell us where folks can find Coaster 101 online?
Yeah, we're at coaster101.com. We're on all forms of social media at Coaster 101. So that's COASTER 101. And then, if you enjoyed the sound of my voice on this podcast and want to go on another niche topic, you can check us out, the Coaster 101 podcast, anywhere you consume your podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. This has been great. And hey, listen, if you get to Colorado, let me know. We'll go to Ilitch Gardens together and ride some roller coasters.
I love it. Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care.